Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Human SOS Show. We are so glad to have you join us today and ask you to be sure and tell us where you're joining from and be sure to ask questions, make comments, because your engagement is a vital part of making this show a good one. Anton, you want to introduce our topic today?
Absolutely. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining wherever you're joining from. As Kevin said, please type in where you're from so we can give you a shout out. Kevin's really good at that. But we're going to talk about anxiety today. And the topic came from actually church on Sunday. And I really liked the message that the pastor shared. And it wasn't necessarily the typical message that, we hear when it comes down to anxiety. And I just wanted to talk about it because it's a very common topic around stress. And short story, he basically talked about back in 2019, he struggled with like debilitating anxiety to where he couldn't function, panic attacks multiple times a day. So he actually took a trip to see his pastor in a different state and stayed with him for a couple weeks. And the first day they sit down to talk, he's thinking the pastor's going to come and pat him on his back and say it's going to be okay, everything's going to be all right. And he didn't do that. The pastor looked him in the eye and said, you know what, it's time to fight. It's time to fight back, and he talked about how this anxiety will destroy his life if he doesn't start to fight back. And he took a very different angle on it, though. He said, it's not you fighting back alone. It's you with the strength of God behind you fighting this thing that you're experiencing right now. And God, you may not feel like you have the strength, but God is going to go into this battle with you. And just, I think that many of us need to hear that message, whether it be, you believe in Jesus Christ, you believe in some other faith, but you have strength within you that's not from you. And when you feel like you can't keep going, come back to that strength, come back to the scripture, come back to something that's outside you. There's even support systems, even people around you, even if you're not religious, like there's people around you who will lift you up. There's people around you who will give you strength that you don't think you have, and you may not have yourself, but there's people and things like the Lord that will go into the battle with you. What are your thoughts on that kind of take with it, Kevin?
Sure. First of all, welcome, Rick and Libor. Glad to have you all this morning. Be free to share your thoughts and comments. Yeah, and this deal of anxiety is very real, and it's still an issue because I see that based on what I observe, and then I recently did a poll on LinkedIn, and of the respondents so far, 57% say that they're feeling overwhelmed a lot of the time. And that's where a part of anxiety is that sense of I've got too much happening and I can't keep going. And so, yeah, it's a real problem. And yes, by design, we have systems within us and with outside of us that can help us deal with these anxieties. And it's something that we too often miss because we are part of the culture of, well, we got to be strong and do it on our own. And so yes, we got to stop making excuses and taking action, but we don't do it alone. And it's so critical. That's why, excuse me, that I remind people that one of our universal designs is for us to help each other, and that's the value in that. And so we really got to hold on to that. Welcome, Ed Mario. Glad to have you from Brazil. Um, but yeah, we talked last time about faith and its value in terms of dealing with stress. Well, this is another way and place that that faith is a part of it. The inner workings of our design and so on.
We talk about stress a lot, and there's no bigger connection to anxiety than stress.
Mm.
How we, how we talk about that stress or how we verbalize that stress, maybe not the word that people would use is stress. Maybe somebody will say worry. Maybe somebody
Mm.
will say, fear. But those are different forms of stress. It all
Mm-hmm.
boils under the one umbrella of stress. And Rick, was asking, can we blame some of our anxiety on COVID? And sure, absolutely, 100%. It's like, me and Kevin talk about this analogy all the time, and we really want people to understand. It's like you have a bucket. Your bucket can hold so much water in it, right? And the water represents stress. And when that bucket gets filled up to where it starts to overflow, you start to experience symptoms. Your bucket's supposed to have some water in it. Stress is okay. Some worry is okay. Some fear is okay. Those things keep us alive. Those keep us functioning, keep us performing sometimes. But when that bucket starts to overflow, when our fear, when our worry, when our stress, when all those things, just too much, when our brain is on overload, that's when we start to experience anxiety. That's when we start to experience depression. Maybe we'll talk about that next week in a different form of it. But specifically with anxiety, and I come from a place of, I've managed this with people a lot, but over the last 2 years, I've experienced it myself for the first time in my life, right? And I'm a health coach. I should know all these things and what to do, but I just been under tremendous amount of stress, and COVID was a big part of it. It wasn't necessarily that I was afraid of COVID. It was just what I saw, what it was doing in the world, and constant thinking about stuff. Anxiety, I forget where I heard this quote, but it talks about, if anybody's familiar with the state of flow, it's when we're like at our best and things are just moving and we're perfect, the best we can be. Flow is control without thought. Anxiety is thought without control, right?
Mm.
And that's what happens. And so to me, when I got anxious, I really got to handle it over the last couple months. I started looking at things like my screen time on my phone, right? I started looking at how much am I putting inside my brain, how much exposure to information, to just videos, to just constant demand from my brain, excitement. It doesn't matter what it is, and I realized it was way too much. There was way too much going on. I was packing it full at all times. So what I started doing is a very simple thing is I started working every single week, reducing my screen time on my phone. And I went from, and this number may be ridiculous, but I've been up to as much as 6 hours, on average per week. And now it's like between 2 and 3. And mind you, that's everything. That's like text messages and everything that's going on. But every time, like, we send information into our brain, whatever irrelevant to what that information is that's stimulating that brain. Think about, we're adding water to that bucket that I just mentioned. And if we're not doing anything to take it out, which is key, the overflow will happen, and then we will start to experience symptoms, which anxiety is one.
Yeah. Welcome, Elsie and Shona and Sina. Glad to have you again this morning with us. Look forward to hearing from you. And yeah, it's about inputs. And I think of from my perspective in faith, at a minimum, we're told to that we're designed to have rest at least one day a week. And that's not because of that's just a religious thought or perspective. It's about meeting the needs of our body, our design. And that period of rest is so important. And I even believe that under current circumstances, that it needs to be, one focus at least one day a week, but each day having time to break and let our mind settle and resolve. And so, yeah, just a key piece of that's one way we can reduce that water input in our lives is by stepping back and removing ourselves from things.
There's not a perfect formula, right, for it. Like, there's not going to be, like, I may need maybe a day of rest for me is enough and it's not enough for you, or vice versa.
Right.
It all depends on the input. That's exactly it, Kevin. I like the word that you chose. It depends on how much of that inflow is going on, right? If your brain is constantly stimulated, constantly overloaded, because of COVID, because of work, because of kids, because of, relationships, because of finances. And then on top of that, people are spending time on social media, and the amount of content we consume has become astronomical,
Right.
right? That day of rest may not be enough anymore, because think
So
about,
true.
like, when this concept came around, what was society like? We didn't have televisions, we didn't have, social media, we didn't have so much to worry about and so much stress and so much, input. And now it's different. So maybe that's not, even a day is not enough, even if you gave a full day, which most of us don't even do that, right?
Right.
So one simple thing I also started doing outside of like reducing the input that I can control is, once again, focusing on simple outflow, right? How do I get some natural outflow that it doesn't overflow? It's a controlled outflow. Breathing exercises, meditation, prayer, you name it. We talk about this all the time, but I use an app. So I'm a numbers person. I like streaks. So I started to use the app called Calm. Calm is a meditation app, but I don't even like really like use the meditation parts in it, because it has a timer on it, and I set it for just 10 minutes. Like, nothing crazy. I started with 20, and I was like, I was missing. It wasn't consistent. I was like, you know what? 10 minutes is small enough that I can get it done no matter what happens. I wake up, I get it done, and it keeps track of your streaks, right? It keeps track of how many days in a row you've done it, how much total time. And I kind of get addicted to that. I start to being like, all right, I want to keep my streak going. Last time I
Mhm.
failed after 6 days. This time I got to 8, and so on and so forth. And it's building. And all I do is I just try to sit in silence and clear my mind as much as I can. Just breathe and be fully present in that moment. And I'm telling you, I feel better. My anxiety was getting so bad, I was having shakes. Like, my hands were shaking. Like, it was
Mhm.
ridiculous. And within probably a month or so of monitoring my screen time, doing some breathing, doing a little meditation, just calmness, things have gotten a lot better. So definitely, I recommend that for anybody. Reach out to Kevin and I. We can help out, but tune into our shows. That's the most important. I see so many regulars here. We talk about this stuff all the time because we see a huge issue, and we want to kind of course correct.
And welcome, Zaid and Daniel. Glad to have y'all here today. And Shona makes a comment. She says, when COVID stopped our day to day life, it brought on anxious thoughts as no end was in sight. Yeah. And I continue to think about this, and uh, I've become so tired of the whole thing of COVID being ever present, and the reality is that we have challenges in life that we've been dealing with decades, and the difference with this is that this thing has become politicized. It has got monies attached to it, and but it is it is another challenge we face. It's very real, no doubt about it. But having it in our face all the time is causing a lot of harm for a lot of people. And we just have to consider ways to, the analogy we use is the bucket analogy. Okay. You've either got to stop the input of the water, or you've got to do controlled release of the water in your life, the stress. And the easiest way, if you will, the path of least resistance is to stop the flow in on certain things. There are some things it's not practical, but one of the things is stopping the inputs, like Anton says. Get away from the screen time and get away from constant inundation of information on TV and radio and newspapers and uh, all of that, and just that by stopping that inflow, it goes a long way, because there are always inflows, but many of them are smaller quantity, more more controlled, and but when we let this in, it is just so devastating. Ultimately, that's why I started a little over a year ago with my Wisdom Seeker podcast, And we started off with a challenge, and I continue to reissue uh, a challenge to everyone. Disconnect from the noise. Figure out what is the noise in your life, disconnect from it, and maybe even permanently remove it, depending. Then, while we're disconnecting, observe, get quiet, get still, just see what's going on. And sometimes that focus of observation is spending time out in creation, alone and quiet, and just observe creation, because creation reflects our creator, and it helps bring perspective and allows us to ground. So we disconnect, we observe, and one of the key pieces is during that time seeking out wisdom. And I think that's a step that even those that take the time to get the break don't take the time to allow that opportunity to grow in wisdom. And the key there is our perspective. At that point, we're starting to look outside of ourselves. Okay. And for those of us that have a spiritual bent, we are at that point trying to see things um, through God's eyes. And when we can get that perspective, the world around us will make more sense, because we are intentionally looking at it. We're not letting it drive us. We're being intentional and making the choice to control what we can, influence what we can, and let go of the rest. Welcome, Shanur. Glad to have you. Let's see, Anton, we've got some comments. I want to make sure we get to those. Daniel says, our children are feeling the full impact of stress because of all the stimulus available to them now. No doubt. Anton, your thoughts?
That's why ADHD is just so rampant right now. But and it's not just kids, folks. Adult ADHD is becoming super prominent. If you're struggling with, like, the point is they don't know the risk of these things. It's for up to us to step in and kind of monitor it. So I started watching my daughter's screen time for similar things. Like, my phone's connected to her phone on our family account, and I can see how much screen time she's doing per day. And I started talking to her. I was like, baby, you need to start watching this. Like, this is something that I want you to keep down. And I want her to make these choices herself as much as I can. You know, I'm a coach. I'm not just about like, hey, I'm going to take your phone away. I have conversations, because what I want, just like I do with adults, I want her to understand what are the risks associated with that. You know, yes, you're giving up some time of enjoyment, some time of, you know, whatever it is that you like doing. But what are the side effects of that? What are, like, you know, Rick said, low sleep. Kids don't deal with that as much, but attention deficit disorder for sure is increasing because of social media and phone use.
Definitely. And Senna makes a suggestion, and something I think we might want to do is have a live about digital media detox, including tips and ways to help. So
I actually have a PowerPoint on that. We can do that next week, Kev, if you want to.
Okay, sounds good. And let's see. Libor says we need to be trained also to keep bottle in the hands as long as necessary. Endurance, yeah. In fact, it's interesting you say that, Libor. My scripture of the day that came up is Isaiah 40:31 and 32, talking about that we can renew our strength, and we can do that and build endurance. And then, so yeah, it's great importance to make that a part of our routine, because the demands, the pressure on us from other sources means it's going to be ever present. So we can't do a once and done thing. It has to become a part of our regular behaviors. And so, good thought. Daniel makes a comment, agree on the political aspect of it. In reality, history repeats itself every 100 years. All the major diseases have hit around the same time. COVID was just so hyped up. Yes, again, we have to deal with it, and I understand that, but because of a lot of factors, this has been blown out of proportion remarkably, and it is contributing, even for those of us that choose to not be focused on it. It's become pervasive because we see the effects of it around us, people wearing masks, um, and just the behaviors have shifted, and the division from it. So even when we make the effort to not allow it to affect us, it's still in our face one way or another, and we've got to be got to know how to address and live with this and have methods in place for it. Let's see. I believe this is Shona. Let's see. Yep. Shona says turn off alerts and notification for apps, and honestly makes a difference right away. And hey, there's even ways now that you can set up a schedule. During these times, my phone is silent. I don't hear it. I don't see it. It's out of sight. So we can use those, and definitely make things better, but we got to be intentional about it. Okay, let's see. And Mario says, what are the ideologies posed by the catastrophic chaos like the Third World War between Russia and Ukraine? Again, we've been dealing with wars throughout history. And what we have to do is keep them in perspective. It's not something new. It's going to directly affect some of us. It's going to indirectly affect all of us. But can I control it? Can I influence it? If I can't, the only other step that I might take at all is praying for people that are involved. And I don't need to know all the details in my face every day to be able to pray for somebody. And so being intentional, do not let that kind of information control us, and to let it drive our inputs, if you will, because that's what we're talking about. Like Anton said, is the inputs that we're dealing with. Um, Further thoughts, Anton?
I get a lot about this war thing because that's where I'm from. I'm from Ukraine. I was born and raised there, but I'm Russian, so like very unique perspective. Um, it's what you said, Kev. Like this is not something I can personally impact. This is not something I can personally even influence, but there is some actions I can take to prepare, right? If I'm worried about a recession that could happen because there is a third world war, because gas prices skyrocket, everything, on top of the inflation that we're having, we're going to recession. Okay. Am I being wise with my money right now? Am I creating some savings to prepare for this? Think it through logically. And if you are, then the rest of that stuff, you got to work on trying to let it go. And like I said, praying can be an answer. Okay. In a way, it's like I did my part by supporting people, by doing the prayer. You'll make yourself feel better actually in the process. But the rest of that stuff, you have nothing to do with. Every other day, there's some different news, pullback, no pullback. But that's the same thing with COVID. It's the same thing with everything else. Can you take care of the things that you can take care of and then move on? The reality is when we're anxious and we're struggling with this stuff, we don't actually take care of anything. All we do is constantly worry about, and anxiety usually causes procrastination, and we don't do anything. We're just worried without any action. And that's what's the problem with it, because we're sitting there and emotionally, or not even emotionally is the wrong word, but in that limbic lizard brain, kind of reactively responding to everything, but not creating that logical action. So come back to logical action, do what you can control.
Yeah, it's again, it's about focus and perspective. And, I continue to think, okay, I'm aware it's around me, but a lot of the inputs that people are doing, I do not listen by choice to news. And even I now avoid at all cost live television, because I can't control that. I can control what I input from media if I'm not watching it live. And it's really interesting, Anton. I've been at this disconnect from television and media now for a few years, and now occasionally we will bring on a live TV show to watch a parade or whatever, and it's really remarkable. Within about 10 minutes, I find myself just becoming so tense, and even to a point that I'm just ready to run somewhere. And it's because of those inputs that I have learned not to allow to be there. Now, and please, some of you may say, oh, well, you're doing the ostrich thing, sticking your head in the sand. No, I am very aware of what's going on because I'm intentional of staying informed, but it doesn't mean it has to control all of my thoughts all of the time. And that's the key, being intentional and in how we make our choices. Uh, let's see here. Senna makes the comment, that it's COVID's being used to provide control. Definitely some thought there. A lot of people considering that. Libor says, "He who has health has hope, and he who has hope has everything." One of the byproducts of what's going on and the anxiety around us is a lot of people becoming hopeless, and the result is we're watching suicide rates go up and all of that, and it's truly sad and unfortunate to see that. Let's see here. One of the things, Ed Mario, and I appreciate the information, but one of the things I find is don't look at sheer numbers. Any number out of context can go either way. To a rich man, $100 means nothing. To a poor man, $100 can be life changing. The context that it keeps being missed is the percentages involved. And if you do your homework on this, you will see that 95+% of the world is not directly affected by this whole pandemic thing. And so just get some context on it. And I suggest that is very important for all of us to consider. And it's a practical tip to use. If you start feeling overwhelmed, get the context. Okay. And Anton's talking about lizard brain, and we talk about fears and how they appear like dragons to us. When it is really remarkable, 2 easy steps. Okay. If we're anxious about something, then just voice it. Say it out loud. And then sometimes when we say it out loud and not just let it roam around in our head, we go, wow, that really even sounds silly. And it makes a difference.
Can you pull up Sina's comment at 627, with all respect?
Yeah.
So with all respect, I think prayers only can't help. I think we should do even little things instead of only feel bad about something or someone, whether it's war in a country or poverty in another country. I am not bragging or claiming anything. I just say if we want to be someone who is making dent in this universe, as Steve Jobs once said, we need to do something. And Sina, you're not wrong by any means, right? But that's such an individualized answer, right? Like not yours in particular. Any answer there needs to be individualized, because if my belief that a prayer is the strongest form of impact I can make because of my faith, right? Then that's maybe the action that I should take. But maybe for somebody else, or for you, or for anybody else, the strongest impact they can make is donate money, right? Maybe go vote a certain way. Maybe it's, go travel and get involved in humanitarian help, whatever it may be, right? But it's coming back to the point of what is the action you're taking versus just sitting there and worrying about. To me, prayer is an action, right? To me, I actually think that good comes out of prayer. They're not always answered. I'm not saying it's like, I ask and I shall receive. He's got a bigger plan than I'll ever understand. But the point is, it's very, very individualized. I'm going to come back to think about logically what you can do. And if you have done it, then let go of that preoccupation with thought all the time. That's going to create anxiety, because that's what anxiety is, that constant thought without control.
Yeah, and I can appreciate your comment, Cena, that in fact, for some people, uh, because of their circumstances, the act of praying about world peace, okay, in itself can produce anxieties. And so I understand, I agree. For me, part of what I do, an action to follow on to my prayers, is taking time, like Anton and I do every week, and I do every week on Monday, to be a voice to say, look, folks, bring this in perspective. So I pray hard, but I also act. And part of what my action is to affect those immediately around me and be an example. See, part of the problem, and I'm going to editorialize here a moment, but I think we get so caught up in changing the world that we forget about changing our world. And we can't quite often control the world, but we can certainly control and or influence our world. And so taking on personal responsibility to reach out to the people right around us, including family, and take action in regards to that is much more effective. But so often we sit around going, oh no, somebody's got to do something about this war. Okay, I can't do something about that war, but I can go to my neighbors, my family, and talk about how we can approach it and bring it into context and have lead into a sense of calm. In fact, I've adopted a hashtag voice of calm, because in our current culture, we lack those voices. And that is something that I do in addition to the prayer. So again, I understand your comment, appreciate it. And again, uh, Ed Mario, I appreciate the sharing the thoughts, but what I challenge you to do is to not take anyone's opinion and look up the data for yourself, do the simple math, and see what the perspective is. I've been doing this for 2 years in a lot of fronts. And when I do that, the outcome of that perspective is really different than what the media is telling us. I do not take what I'm told in the media at face value. In fact, I will rather take it with suspicion and not accept it unless I can validate it other ways. So um, let's see. Zaid, boy, Anton, I think we've hit a nerve here. Media became a sales industry. It's all about numbers, whether rating our product services being sold. And so, yeah, creating scarcity of time and all of that is all a part of being able to get people to do things that we want them to do. And the
Yeah,
best,
just before you jump to another comment, because I know when you click off, you jump off. Just to the point of media, the loudest people became the most influential. The people that can attract the most attention became the most influential in our world right now. And
yeah.
it's scary. That is so scary, because like, think about what we just talked about and combine these two things. Our kids are constantly just bombarded with media. They're constantly exposed to it. It's turning off their ability to really reason and think through things, right? And on top of that, we paired that with the most influential people became the loudest. Take a look at some of these most influential people that are millions of viewers. Are they the people that have created Pulitzer Prize winning publications? Are they the ones that develop Nobel Prize winning science? No, those are not popular. They're not entertaining. It's the entertainers that have became that. People that don't have the education in the background to lead the world are now starting to lead the world. And their opinion in the eyes of our kids, and even some adults nowadays, is more important than some of these people that have experienced life and experienced school and all this stuff, and they actually know what should be happening, but they're not the ones that are being hurt. That is scary to me. That petrifies me. If that doesn't scare you, I mean, really start paying attention to it, because it's not good.
And key there is intentionality, such an important concept. We've got to stop living in autopilot, because when we're in autopilot living, we are subject to what's going on around us, and we are allowing even the things we can control and influence, not we're allowing ourselves not to take those on and do something with it. It's a failure on our part. Let's see. Libor suggests main two roots of stress these days come from beliefs our parents will receive adequate prepaid care and our kids' degradation and education steps. We're in we're stuck in Job, like in the whale's stomach. It sometimes definitely feels that way. And Shona talks about, yes, service and prayer. And I was reading recently that about faith and actions, and they go together. It's not one or the other; it's both.
That was Navarre, I think, but I know you can't tell because it doesn't say
Oh, is that Navarra?
Navarre. Yeah.
Oh, welcome, Navarra, by the way. I just saw that you've joined us. Thanks for being with us, and always glad to hear from you. So thanks, Anton. I appreciate that. This one, okay, right here, Zaid hits such a key statement. Let's start by fixing our own bedroom and home before fixing the city or even the world. Uh, and our focus even on trying to deal with world issues keeps us distracted, it keeps us anxious, and keeps us from addressing what we can. And that's why this whole thing is become insidious, is it not only causes us problems, but it perpetuates because we're not paying attention, and we're
Just
not
to that point, Kev, to Zaid's point, like bring it back to anxiety, folks. I mentioned a few things that I've done. That is absolutely one of the things that I've done. I get up, I have my little routine, I breathe and meditate, I pray, I move into making my bed, right? Then my mind is like shot at night. I'm not a night person at all. I'm a morning person for sure. So like I clean up my house, I make sure all the dishes from nighttime from the kids is cleaned up, and I make my space be good and clean. That is not distracting. It doesn't feel cluttered. But guess what? I take control. Like anxiety makes you feel like you have zero control. At least something over so small like my bedroom and my home, I feel like I got control and a grasp on. Right? As soon as I step out, COVID, war, all this stuff can happen outside my house. But at least in my domain, I have control. And that's a very strong and important feeling when you're battling anxiety.
Yeah, such a key part. Welcome, Anthony. Glad to have you. Hi, guys. Looking for an intelligent chat. How? I hope you consider this
Into
an
the wrong
intelligent
place.
chat. We try. I'll say that. Um, and let's see here. And Anthony makes another comment, says, sadly, America and England and the West have become a dumbed down nation. Sadly, Putin knows this. And I find it interesting. And I've got to offer this up as perspective. I came across some information from some sources that I use to stay informed. And it's interesting that apparently Great Britain, England is now uh, stepping away from all of the mandates and all of that, saying, okay, it's time to move on. And I think that people are stepping back and trying to get this into perspective. And that's the key. When we are so inundated that we lose perspective, it's hard to be productive with anything, because then we become overwhelmed and anxious, and many people just shut down. And then when they shut down, the rest of their health starts deteriorating, and it's just unfortunate. Let's see here. Good comments. Thank you, everybody. Zaid makes a comment: we need to grow and have wisdom big enough to know how the autopilot works, then to control it. This podcast is one to help us in finding knowledge and control the autopilot. Thank you. Appreciate your confidence in what we're doing here, Zaid. And by the way, you and others are an integral part.
Can I comment just on the autopilot thing? We
Sure.
get stuck in anxiety, and it's the same thing. Anxiety becomes an autopilot that our brain
Ah,
is used to, right? Like the autopilot can be out of it or in anxiety. And right now, the world is becoming stuck on autopilot as anxiety. Anxiety is becoming a norm. That's what's crazy. Like I'm telling you, there's probably more people, and I say probably with a strong belief that it's true. I would say more than 50% of modern countries that are exposed to media, that are exposed to constant, inputs and overflow of inputs, more people struggle with anxiety than not. Whether we
yep.
know how to label it properly and diagnose it properly is a different story. But the symptoms of it, more people are struggling with it or not. And that's what's become the norm. And that's scary. It's not going to get better anytime soon. That's the reality. So we have to break out of that autopilot and be able to reset to create a new autopilot that serves us, a good behavior.
Yes. And the best phrase I've ever heard, and we are in the midst of it fully, is called the tyranny of the urgent. We are so focused on gotta, right now, right now, right now. And there is, Anton and our military, we know there's time for clear and decisive action, but we aren't in that time. We never have been, and likely most will never be in that time. Therefore, the tyranny of the urgent is uh, something we've allowed to be put on us. Okay. Very few decisions that we make are life and death imminent on a daily basis. The closest to a life and death decision we make on a daily basis is those of us that drive in traffic, especially for me in Atlanta. If I decide to get in that traffic, that's getting life and death. But for that reason, I am made arrangements to avoid that where I can. Um, and Anthony, yes, we need to be praying, and that's a certainly a good action. But one of the things that we need to be mindful of is what we are being told in the media right now is an inaccurate picture. It's designed to keep us in the tyranny of the urgent. I find it interesting. We have some friends that actually have family still in the Ukraine, and what they're saying from a Ukrainian perspective is they're not overwrought over all of this. Yes, there's issues there, but they're choosing, or for whatever reason, the populace there is not necessarily sitting around or hiding in corners, cowering, worried. They're going on with life. So let's just be sure not to base our perspectives on what we're being told by the media around us. It's just don't do it. Test the information. Welcome, Tushar. Glad to have you with us. Um, let's see. Wow. Uh, okay. Zaid, the reason you might not be seeing Anthony's comments, he's coming from Facebook. Which, by the way, glad to see see you here from Facebook.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. Let's see. Uh, Anthony's comment. So many people affected mental and trust as well in the last 2 years. Money needs to be thrown to help folk, especially children now. Yeah, I appreciate that our priorities need to shift. But I'm with Anton. If we work on our own homes, and then as we become an example of working and dealing with our own homes the way we can affect the homes of others. And I think that long term will be more effective than any government supplements or assistance that can be offered. Um, Sena, glad to have you. Have a good day. Appreciate you being here. Um, Anton, I know you've got some time
Yeah,
constraints.
I gotta run too, but I just wanna, I was listening, thinking about media and things like that. Like, I don't know if it's intentional from their end, or they're just giving us what we want in a way, right? We want sensationalism. We want, this crazy news all the time. That's kind of what we respond to. That's what creates ratings. And we've talked about that as kind of driving the way everything is. It's about us controlling that. It's about us turning off the TV, and if we stop watching it as much, if we stop paying attention to it as much, they'll stop giving it to us. Just because we act like that's something that we want or that's what captures our attention doesn't mean it's good for us. It's the analogy I think about is children and candy. Children always want candy. They're super happy when they get candy. But in the long run, is it good that we keep constantly giving our kids candy over and over and over? No, we are aware of that. We understand that very well. But we as human beings, as adults, are being fed media candy all the time, and we're eating it up, and they keep giving us more because we keep eating it up. We have to stop eating that media candy.
Yep. And that's something we control. We can't control what they put out, but we can control whether we allow ourselves to eat it. And I think that's such a key element right now. And anxiety, I challenge any one of you, okay, for a minimum 2 weeks, preferably 30 days, turn off the TV, the radio, and put down the newspaper. Just walk away from it. Okay. And see if, and at the end of that period, when you come back and even just try it out and see what happens, your reaction and your response will be remarkable in a negative way. And what you will notice is your anxiety levels. I will guarantee you this. If you do this, your anxiety levels will drop. If you do nothing else but that, it will drop. Disconnect. And with the time you gain from having disconnected, observe, and then seek out wisdom. The greatest thing that we can gain more than gold and money and status or any of that is to gain wisdom. And when we do that, it makes such a difference in our life. And therefore, we can affect the lives around us. Movements have done more to change history than any government initiative, organizational initiative, or anything else. And part of what Anton and I continue to do is to build momentum in a movement to begin to face stress and how to manage it so that we become humanly sustainable. That's why we do this every week. It's not for glory. It's definitely not for money. And, but we do this because, we want to see a movement started. And if each of us continues with this movement and influences the next person around us or 2 or 3 people around us, before we know it, this is going to be massive. And we start having an effect in a big way. But it has to start with the effect in our own lives to influence others.
Tune in next week, folks. We'll talk about media detoxing. I don't mean necessarily just not watching the news, but we'll just talk about technology, I should say.
Yes.
In general.
Computer-based time, devices there. Yes. And that, I think, be an opportunity for us all to talk and figure out some good ways, healthy ways to approach it. Definitely.
And I think it was Cena, he's left, but Cena, I think, have recommended it. Folks, if you will have specific topics that you want covered, please feel free. That's what we love. As soon as he asked, I was like, sure, we'll deliver that. That's no problem. Me and Kevin always think about what topics are relevant, but it's best when you let us know what those are. But okay. I have to run. I got to get ready for a meeting. Thank you all so much. I really, really appreciate you all.
See you, brother.
Bye.
So, yes, definitely. Be with us next week, and we will tackle the thought of how to do media detox. And I would love to hear for you to take on the challenge, and then here in 2 weeks, 30 days to see what happens, how your life is affected. See if your anxiety levels are affected. And by the way, if you affect your anxiety levels, also you're going to find that your mental, emotional, and physical health improves as a result. So thank you, everyone. Boy, what a great day with all of the comments and everybody contributing. And just so you'll know, we love to hear from you all. In fact, before we get off here, Tushar made a comment. It's better if I can learn to move from reacting on autopilot to knowing what sets me off and then managing how I'll respond. Yes, that is so true. And that's what we're going to be talking about next week, is how to manage some of those things and affect our responses. So everyone, thank you so much. You're a blessing to Anton and I. And in turn, we hope that we're able to contribute to everyone's well-being. God bless. Have a great week, and consider disconnecting, observing, and seeking wisdom, and especially disconnecting from inputs that we don't need to have. See, I hope that you will share what happens as a result. Look forward to either being proven right, or I'm open to being proven wrong. So God bless. Thank you, everyone. Have an amazing week. We'll see you next Tuesday.